Welcome back, everyone, for another live Mast Cell 360 show. I'm Jamie Fries Miller, your host and health coach here at Mast Cell 360. Whether you're joining us live right now or catching the replay later, we're so glad to have you with us today. These lives are all about empowering you on your mast cell journey with practical insights, expert guidance, and support of our amazing community. Today's show is all about you guys. Ask Us Anything MCAS. We're going to be doing a live Q&A, and as you can see, I'm joined by both lead practitioners, Kimberly Quirk and Alex Bingham, as well as our other health coach here, Cam, at Mast Cell 360. So before we jump into those questions, feel free to chime in the comments. If you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, you need to be logged in order to submit a question. So make sure that you log in. And feel free, we don't know who's here unless you comment. So feel free to drop in those questions so that we can get rolling right away. And while those questions go in, I will be going over our quick disclaimers. Hi, Tracy from the Oregon coast. All right. This presentation is for informational and educational purposes. It is not meant to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent illness. So be sure to discuss any health recommendations with your healthcare provider. And just a reminder that any of the links that we may share during this presentation or on our website are affiliate links, which means Mast Cell 360 may take a very small commission if you purchase through those links. We only recommend products that we love, use personally, or use with our clients in the Mast Cell 360 clinic. Okay, so just a reminder for those who are just joining us live, please keep your questions on the topic of MCAS and understand that we are unable to answer personal in-depth health questions. So if you do type it out and it's a little bit too personal, we will try our best to answer it more generally. And it shouldn't be a problem right now, but if questions start really ramping up, try not to submit your question more than one time. It just helps us keep track and make sure that all the questions get answered. Okay. So let's see, we already have one coming in. How does MCAS and SIBO overlap? How can either lead to weight loss? Who wants to take this question? Or start us off, Alex? Oh, we can't hear you. Hold on. Hold on, Alex. There we go. Got you. You're double on there somehow.
Sorry about that.
We're good now.
First, just hello to everyone. And I'm getting a double echo. I don't know if other people are getting that. But anyway, I think there's oftentimes a connection between SIBO and MCAS. As we know, MCAS is mostly a secondary problem, and it's caused by any number of things like allergies or toxins, infections, medications, stress, things like that. And so if you have dysbiosis or if you've got an abnormal microbiome, that can trigger mast cells to release histamine and any of the 200 other compounds that are inflammatory. And oftentimes will create a situation where people are really uncomfortable.
Cam or Kim, do you have anything to add about the overlap between those?
Yeah, well, right, the mold connection for sure, right? The toxin piece that Alex was talking about. So when you detox mold, know that it's coming through your gut. It's going to throw off that biome. Or if you're in mold, right, it's coming through your gut. It's going to throw off that biome. The motility piece is huge too, because that motility can slow down, but it can speed up too. And I wonder if the poster, saying how can that lead to weight loss? So if we're not absorbing what we're eating really well, which might be true with a biome that's just off, or the speed of things coming through. If you have a lot of like looser stool or diarrhea, you're not going to absorb a lot, right, of nutrition and things like that. Or if you get into a corner where you have too much sensitivity, food sensitivities and things like that, it's also, we're going to start having some nutritional components, right? And it might be harder to hold on to that weight.
Yeah. Go ahead. I was going to say, you look like you want to add to that, so go ahead.
Yeah, so your microbiome is really set up to feed both yourself and also to feed the other microbes that are present in your gut. They work in a really symbiotic way. And they do that to keep your gut healthy, and they do that to produce B vitamins, and they do that to produce all of these other things that your body needs to function appropriately. So when you have an imbalance in your microbiome, you're not breaking down food the way that you should to feed yourself, but you're also not breaking down food to feed those other microbes in your gut. So both of those can also contribute to weight loss or, even weight gain problems as well. Just metabolic issues in general.
Yeah. Did it look like we lost Alex for anyone else?
It looks like it's
yeah. Yeah, and I'll just add one other thing that we see commonly in the clinic with SIBO and MCAS is that often it's hard to kind of clear the SIBO. So some of our clients have tried the SIBO protocols or the SIBO specific diets to clear the SIBO. But if they still are experiencing a trigger like mold, which is the most common trigger we see of MCAS at Mast Cell 360, then they may find that SIBO returns and returns and returns. So we often want to continue to look at what, like SIBO might not necessarily be the trigger. Dysbiosis could contribute to the MCAS for sure, but we want to continue to look at what's triggering those two things.
Yeah, okay. And I would say if you've done some things to help, like try to work on SIBO and it's not working, look further upstream, right, at some of these things that we're talking about, just to because you'll just keep trying to treat something, and if the terrain's not there, it's not going to hold. That it's just going to stay, imbalanced.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Lynn is asking, how do I heal from MCAS, histamine, mold? What supplements? And she also added a second one. I think she's asking how. That just said food allergies. So I'm wondering if she's just adding food allergies. How does she heal from MCAS, histamine intolerance, mold, food allergies, and how do you? So that's kind of loaded question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So there's a big question, right? And everybody's going to be a little bit different, but the commonalities, I guess we should focus on the commonalities that we see there. Mold is a big one. Making sure your environment is free from mold. But also sometimes like, oh, I got out of mold. Now am I healed? Am I so much better? And it's like, no, we also have to detox and deal with the colonization piece and all the things. So there are some commonalities, right? Reducing histamine in the diet can help symptoms. It's not a healing diet. Calming down the nervous system, which contributes to that histamine piece. A lot of us get that nervous system piece upregulated from the mold piece. Or from past trauma or just nervous system dysregulation. So those are like the most common things we see is the mold, the nervous system, and then of course it makes sense to look at your diet in terms of histamine. I would say the big things. And then you're saying what supplements, that's very individual. Yeah, we wouldn't be able to say specifically there.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is kind of finding those root triggers. So like removing them as much as possible and then what Kimberly was saying is like calming down those mast cells through things like the nervous system. And then if we're not tolerating any supplements, that is also kind of points to the nervous system. But I will say we do have, if you're looking to kind of just stabilize and you don't have salicylate intolerance, I'd highly recommend our top 8 supplement course. And Zach can drop that into the comments below because that would give you an idea of like what supplements to start experimenting with to find which ones work for you individually. Okay. Next question. Pam is asking, is a low histamine diet good for long COVID and why?
I'm going to let Cam address that.
I've spent the last 4+ years hanging out in the long COVID and post-vaccine groups. That's personally, what threw our family over. And I would say that the vast majority of people who have long COVID or post-vaccine issues probably have some MCAS. Now, having MCAS doesn't necessarily mean that you have histamine issues automatically. So you kind of have to play around and see if that's your case or not. I would say that they go hand in hand oftentimes. So it can be incredibly helpful. For me, when I first started, a low histamine diet barely moved the needle because there was so many other things going on, and I just kind of had to gradually peel those layers back and find out what was going on enough that I could separate it out, calm things down, et cetera, et cetera. But if you wanted to look at the low histamine diet, we have an excellent post on our website that kind of walks through that. And I would say, look at that, give it a good 4 to 6 weeks. It usually also takes some other supports too, whether that's supplements or medications. The nervous system piece is really big with COVID. So it's all kind of a motion in progress. You just kind of have to pick at it one thing at a time.
Yeah, and I think reiterating, like giving it the 4 to 6 weeks to see if it helps just bring maybe inflammation down in your body. And our resources are really good, and they're actually pretty varied as far as diet goes if you're not adding in the salicylates and oxalate intolerances. But also it's not meant to be a long-term diet too, because we don't want people to remove too many foods as well. So keeping that in mind.
Yeah, we always say swap instead of drop. So rather than, dropping something like spinach, swap it out for something like arugula. Keep as many foods as you possibly can.
Okay, Patty. Patty is asking, how can we protect ourselves from the flu season? Who wants to take this one?
Alex, you want to take that one?
I'll give it a try. Hi, Patty. Sorry, folks, I'm really struggling with my internet here today. I'm just recovering from the flu also, so not a good combination. How can we protect ourselves from the flu season? Well, don't do what I did and get sick. So, but I think that, two of the things that I try to do is to make sure that my vitamin D is up, that my zinc, that I'm taking zinc, and that I'm thinking about what my exposures are going to be. We saw a lot less flu during early COVID because people were isolated and were wearing masks and things like that. People that are really vulnerable, when they go out, they should think about wearing a mask and not putting yourself in situations where you're going to get a lot of exposure. Certainly keeping a really good diet that helps to protect your immune system with a lot of antioxidant vegetables and fruits and things. Getting some exercise, making sure that you get enough sleep. Probably number one is to not get run down, not rested, and deal with your stress. And I'd like to hear from, and also you can take immune boosting supplements. There are mushroom extracts for people who can tolerate things like that. There are peptides like thymogen. There are herbs like astragalus. There are a number of things that you can do to boost your immune system. And how about others? What do other people do?
Yeah, I would reiterate, if you have a low immune system, like avoiding, right? You're going to be in a crowd or you're visiting, especially if you're traveling or anything like that, wearing a mask, washing hands, all the things that we do. But working on gut health, as well as, increasing vitamin C and sleep and stress. Like you said, Alex, it's for me are the top ones. And I feel like everybody gets sick when, we're thrown off our sleep schedule because of holidays, and we're probably also eating some sugar and things like that. And it just kind of lowers the immunity in the gut. So yeah, the more that you can kind of self-care around the basics, I think makes a big difference, plus increasing some of the immune supports that you mentioned.
Yeah, we joke in our house. It's like, is it really flu season, or is it eating candy and sugar and not going outside as much season? So, continuing up the good diet and then, more outside time. Okay, next question. Tracy's asking, do histamine intolerance folks I'm trying to read this in a way that makes sense. Do you histamine intolerance with folk? Yes, we do see acid reflux with histamine intolerance. Silent reflux associated with thick mucus in throat, phlegm, hoarse voice, sore throat associated with histamine intolerance as well. So
I guess what I would say there, like the thick mucus and all of that is telling me there's probably some kind of allergy or immune response going on to something. Could be airborne, right? Could be mold, could be something else we're eating or ingesting, or something like that causing some kind of allergy or inflammation, creating that thick mucus, because that mucus is like the body's response to try to protect. It's trying to coat. And then, yes, absolutely. That acid reflux piece can be a sign that there's histamine growth going on. So that's just another sign, right? That there's something going on in your environment or that you're eating that may be causing some symptoms coming from the immune system.
Cam or Alex, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that phlegm, throat, mucus, hoarse voice, typical signs of reflux. We call it silent reflux sometimes if you don't have heartburn. And I think for some people, it's caused from a low stomach acid as opposed to too much acid. And you might notice that if you have gas, bloating, or belching shortly after you eat, a sign that you have low stomach acid, or that food seems to just sit in your stomach for a long time after you eat. It's not getting digested fast enough because you don't have stomach acid, and that food can then reflux up. So anything that is creating more mast cell release of inflammatory compounds can make that situation worse.
Thank you. All right. Next question. Can you still get MCAS under control with underlying immunodeficiency that cannot be cured? Deficiency of all the immunoglobulins, MBL, and also T cells. Alex, would you like to kick us off with that one?
Yeah. I'm not sure what MBL stands for here. If anyone else could tell me, but I think that typically, rather than looking at diagnoses and what's the treatment for each diagnosis, we kind of look at the system as a whole. And many of the people that come to us have a lot of different symptoms that are a combination of factors. There may be mold that's the underlying root cause, but that's causing the mast cells to be out of control. It's suppressing the immune system. And so you have to deal with a number of things if their nervous system is oftentimes dysfunctional. So what we do here is we try to help people get their nervous system back to functional status, try to suppress or quiet down the mast cell response so that the body's natural immune system can be as strong as possible, and then remove the underlying cause. What we find is that sometimes what appears to be an immunodeficiency actually gets a lot better once the mold is out and other things are cleared from the body, the microbiome is balanced, and realize that there are a lot of people with underlying immunodeficiency. It could be combined variable immunodeficiency, it could be a lot of different problems that go through life without very many infections and setbacks because their system has been made strong in other ways.
Yeah. All right. I think this is a follow-up to our SIBO question in the beginning. Don't have loose stools, but lots of food sensitivities and losing weight. So trying to learn how to get back to a healthier weight, which I think is a great goal to set for yourself. And we do see a lot of food sensitivities without the loose stools in our community as well.
Yeah, that sounds like it's a reduction of what she was eating. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I will say too, I had that as one of my biggest problems at the beginning. I went from like 145 pounds to 100 pounds within a few months. And then, my weight has gradually come back up. Addressing that First of all, environmentally, making sure that you're taking out anything that's contributing to that, because it didn't matter what I did. When I was still in that mold exposure, I couldn't control what I was eating. I couldn't control my weight. My body just either was or wasn't accepting and digesting things and utilizing that nutrition. So getting out of that was incredibly helpful. And then for me, it's just been a lot of people like to go kind of bottom up. They want to start with probiotics or things like that, and really starting like top down, digesting, making sure that your stomach acid is good, like Alex was talking about earlier, like Kimberly was talking about with the gallbladder and the liver, making sure those are functioning, making sure that you're getting in, the enzymes if you have SIBO and dysbiosis, so that you're actually breaking down those foods and utilizing those nutrients, and just kind of gradually working through all of those steps and supporting your body the best way that you possibly can. And your body will come back online and do what it's created to do, a lot of times. So that's been incredibly helpful for me. And then your metabolism will catch up eventually too. And sometimes you might need to tweak it a bit.
Okay. Let's see. All right. We have a first-time person here. Welcome. Question is, can a viral or bacteria infection cause a how do you say that?
Labyrinthitis.
Or dumping?
Is that the same as vertigo?
Vertigo could be a symptom. The labyrinthitis just means inflammation of the labyrinth, which is the semicircular canals next to the inner ear.
Yeah.
And definitely viral illnesses are typical. Maybe the most common cause of labyrinthitis and vertigo in younger people. And I've seen it so many times. If it doesn't go away, though, then you have to look for other causes. The dumping part, I'm just trying to make that connection. What
Like
that might be.
Is that oxalate dumping?
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. If you have oxalate dumping in that area, it makes sense that a lot of inflammation would be in that area. If you have like the sinus colonization, I do see that with clients where there's an issue with those kinds of symptoms, vertigo type symptoms, and increased inflammation with oxalate dumping. But have I seen it tied to a viral or bacterial infection? Not necessarily, but that might be part of also what's going on. If the terrain is off, you can have a lot of chronic infections and things like that.
Okay. Melanie is asking, what can she do for inflammation healing when she's just had her gallbladder removed?
And a liver cyst. I mean, I would look further up, like kind of what happened with the gallbladder, right? So what does our gallbladder do? I mean, it serves so many purposes, but some of the main purposes are to digest fats and to detox toxins. So sometimes we see that gallbladder have issues when bile flow gets kind of cloggy, which can happen if you have a lot of mycotoxins from mold coming through, and there might have been stones that formed. And then the fact that the liver has a cyst too just makes me wonder, have you looked at mycotoxins? And I would make sure you kind of rule that out, because that would give a clear path then, right, for what could you do to reduce inflammation and the healing path there. But what could you do? I mean, there's plenty of people, clients who do have no gallbladder. And so there's a lot of things you can do to support that, right? Because your liver is still going to make bile. It just won't come out at the same rate or way that your gallbladder did. So you certainly can do things, but sometimes need to add things like ox bile and things like that to supplement the bile piece. But I think looking big picture at what is causing that issue and making sure ruling out the mold and mycotoxin piece for sure.
Anyone have anything to add? No? Okay. Melanie's also asking how to strengthen your gut after 53 antibiotics and mold. So mold being a piece of the gallbladder. potentially there for her.
Yeah.
Well, I would say number one would be try to avoid the 54th antibiotic. But, I guess the first question I would have is, what is the reason for all the antibiotics? And is there something you need to do to at least prevent that? Are there chronic sinus infections? Are there chronic UTIs, whatever they are? And look into those areas. But what I do see, let's imagine that there was mold and that's gone now. I could really see that the gut has gone through a lot of damage. And what I would suggest is kind of like what Cam and Kimberly already said, is to start from the top and kind of reevaluate the whole gut. Are you digesting your food? Do you have enough stomach acid? Are there food sensitivities that need to be looked at? Are you digesting with enough bile and support from your gallbladder? And then thinking about repair. Do you have leaky gut? And to me, I used to do lots and lots of tests for leaky gut. And what I found out was that most of the people that had significant GI problems from chronic antibiotics, from recurrent gastroenteritis or food poisoning or many other reasons, they had leaky gut. And it's the small intestine is an amazing structure when you think about it. It's one cell layer thick. That's what protects you from whatever is coming down the tube. And any number of things can disrupt that. Those cells have to replace themselves every 3 to 5 days. So it's like a war zone when you think about all the enzymatic activity, the biologics that are happening, and food sensitivities, all those kinds of things. Now, glutamine is an amino acid that is the primary fuel source of the repair of the lining of the gut. So I see things like glutamine to be very helpful in repairing the gut. But any number of other things can be used also. And a lot of those things are soothing. They could be like marshmallow root, slippery elm, anything that can protect the tissues so that you can kind of like let them heal. Make sure that you have enough butyrate for the colon. That's the primary fuel source there. Make sure that there's no yeast overgrowth, that you don't have dysbiosis from SIBO in the small intestine. I mean, you can really have a field day with that. And I would say in functional medicine back in the 90s, when we started looking at these things, we would always start in the gut. And now we have to kind of start with the immune system and mold and things like that. And then when the gut comes, there's a lot of different things you can do.
All right. Paul is asking, how do we find root triggers? She's lost 72 pounds. MCAS is causing severe inflammation. She's been on chicken and potatoes for 9 months, moved out of the house. So kind of lost on what to do next. Before I turn this over to the practitioners, I just want to, remind everyone real quick that we are a remote health consulting clinic. And Paula, we're extremely sorry that you have been on a 2-food diet for 9 months now. That can be extremely scary, and we completely understand because it's something that some of us personally have experienced, as well as something that we help clients with. So if you're just feeling lost on what to do next, we do have 2 tiers of support. So foundational, which would be a strategy session with either Cam or myself, or you can kind of go over some of those immediate next steps but for that long-term healing plan. You might want to look into our advanced track, which would allow you to meet with lead practitioner as well as health coaching support. So you guys can learn about that if anyone on the call is interested. mastcell360.com/application is where you can learn about working with us more individually. So again, Paul, I'm sorry that you're going through that. Let's see, I'm going to put your question back up and hopefully get you some hope today.
So yeah, it sounds like she's moved out of the house. So I'm assuming she knew it was a mold issue, right? So that was a huge, huge first step, right? To do that. But then, yeah, when you're on the other side of it, it is calming down the immune system and the nervous system, basically. So, and it's a little bit 50-50. So definitely doing some nervous system work. We usually recommend Primal Trust can help at least calm down, but also then looking at the other side of it and calming down the inflammation piece, getting the mast cells stabilized. That's where the mast cell supplement course may be helpful depending on your sensitivities. And I'm guessing you're pretty sensitive if you're down to chicken and potatoes. Don't know if you're also supplement sensitive, assuming you might be. So yeah, that's where we go really low and slow in clinic on both calming the nervous system and trying to get that tolerance piece back because that's really what's been lost. Yeah.
All right. Amber's asking a similar question. Reacting to oxalates, salicylates, amines, believes it's gut health down to 4 foods. Again, where do you start?
Yeah. So Amber, depends on where you are, but if you haven't looked at the mold piece, look at the mold piece because oxalates and salicylates both come down the sulfation pathway, right? And so that's just telling me there's some overload on your sulfation pathway, or there could be some missing cofactors there, right? But either way, would look at the mold mycotoxin piece, and then how could we support, that sulfation piece? And it's a little bit different for everybody, but sometimes it is, right, taking out that like already have, right, probably taking out the oxalates and the salicylates and probably the histamines, right, and finding foods that you can eat, calming that nervous system down, and then kind of going from there. In clinic, I would probably want to run a test like an organic acids type test or amino acids type test to see what cofactors might be missing that you could support when you are ready to onboard, because those could be missing. And especially if we get down to 4 foods, of course, there's going to be cofactors missing because there's just a bigger pull on the body to detox and then less foods coming in.
And I would say, people who are down to just a few foods like this, it's really imperative that you start finding those things that allow you to bring more foods on. And, that's going to vary for different people. With the salicylate piece, medications are often helpful, and compounding medications can often be really helpful because there's so many fillers and ingredients that we react to. It's tough when you're reacting to pretty much everything, but it's not hopeless.
Okay. Robert's asking, is melatonin in large doses helpful at reversing MCAS long-term danger response? So I was going to say, but Jill Krista uses melatonin a lot more than we do. But Alex, do you have any thoughts on this? I wouldn't say it's the only thing. It's not going to probably reverse MCAS if we're not looking at the triggers. So I would probably start there, remove the triggers first.
Yeah, I'm wondering too, MCAS long-term danger response, if part of what you're referring to, Robert, is the cell danger response, which is a 3-phase repair mechanism that all organisms go through after injury. And melatonin can certainly be used for parts of these. I would never see it as a magic bullet. You would use it with a lot of other things too. And so, what Jamie said is critical. So you first of all find what is causing the mast cells to be so reactive, and where are you in the cell danger response? Are you still in the initial stage where there's just a lot of inflammation caused by the original insult? Are you starting to repair things, which is the second stage? Are you starting to return avenues of communication between cells and things like that? So it's a very complicated issue, but I would think of melatonin as probably one of the lesser important of all the things that we have to do.
All right. Are fatigue type symptoms on contrast dye and a CT scan likely to get worse or stay the same? No choice over having the scans and contrast dye.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you have mast cell, right, and that's you react to it each time, I mean, that immune response could get louder. And that's been at least my personal experience with that kind of thing. The body kind of saying no, and we're kind of continuing to do it. Yeah, you're saying you don't have a choice. Could you look at or talk with your provider about other options that might be lower risk, or what kind of options might be there for you, and what that trade-off is?
There's a lot of different contrast dyes. Sometimes they have different ones that you can actually use, and sometimes they actually do need that contrast, and sometimes they don't necessarily need that contrast in order to see what they're looking at. And even if you do have to do those contrasts in order to get the clear scans that you need, you can do pre-prep, right? Those are things that help calm those mast cells down and help onboard some of that support, so that when you do have that contrast and your body responds to it, you've already got those in place to really help you through it. We have a resource that we pass out fairly regularly that Zach can drop in from TMS for a Cure, and it's their ER protocol. And there's some really good information about medical settings and options for people with MCAS in that document.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Cam. The contrast dyes are oftentimes divided into ionic versus non-ionic, and your non-ionic dyes are going to be a lot less destructive. And so that's one thing you could do. But also, an MRI doesn't use the same technology as a CAT scan. And oftentimes, if the MRI has a dye, it might be something radio labeled, and it might actually not be as allergenic or likely to trigger the mast cells. So maybe an ultrasound would work in some cases if you're looking at other things. So you can ask about the different modalities, and then you can ask about the different types of dyes, or maybe different kind of contrasts. And then finally, like Cam said, there are protocols where you would, calm down the mast cells as much as possible. You might get IV Benadryl or something like that before the protocol, and sometimes a very short course of steroids, which, we kind of like, steroids terrible, but, a very brief course that prevents a huge reaction can be a real benefit if you have to have a procedure. And I think you just need to communicate this, and you have to know that the person that you're talking to, like the radiologist, whoever, is listening to you. And if you feel like you're getting blown off, you need to keep going so that you don't get a bad reaction. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to be your own advocate.
All right. I'm going to throw this one up. I had a hysterectomy in February on 3 pumps of estrogen, can't control histamine levels, struggling with bloated stomach. Any suggestions for balancing histamine levels? So yeah, we do see hormone imbalance as a huge trigger of MCAS, and there's a correlation between estrogen and histamine. So Cam, any advice?
Yeah, so it sounds like, back in February, threw you into a major, right? And then, getting on estrogen, can't control histamine. One thing I would look at is look at your estrogen, right? What form are you using of it? Because estrogen can be, right, increase histamine, but also finding that a lot of estrogen out there on the market also has propylene glycol, which is a mast cell trigger. And I ran into this myself pretty recently with just the patch for estrogen, and it has propylene glycol, and my body definitely said no to that. So looking at your estrogen, because you may do better on a compounded formula without that. And that's what we typically see. And then she's also struggling with bloated stomach. So that tells me there could be some stuff going on, like SIBO-ish going on for sure too. And that can add to that histamine piece.
Yeah. If you're not seeing somebody who's functional that's overseeing your hormone replacement therapy too, I would suggest looking for somebody who does that. A lot of conventional places will just throw estrogen in, and a lot of functional places will balance that out with progesterone or pregnenolone, some of those precursors that are really helpful. And they'll take a more holistic approach and look at those hormones and what they're actually doing. We do have a blog post on it, on hormones and MCAS on our website that you might find helpful.
I think those are really good points. We generally think of estrogen as being activating of mast cells and progesterone as being quieting mast cells. Unfortunately, the conventional way of looking at a post-hysterectomy is that you don't need progesterone, just need estrogen. And I think that's a mistake, number one, especially if you're dealing with insomnia or anxiety. And also, it's possible these days to do tests where you can look at the estrogen metabolism so that you can find out, is the estrogen moving through your system? Is it getting bottled up somewhere where you might be getting more excessive estrogen effects than you need to? And there are things that you can generally do at each stage of the way. And I do agree with Kim that functional hormone specialist would be very helpful in helping to balance those things.
And then just as far as controlling the histamine too, it's like, can you bring your histamine down in other areas like the diet if you're not doing that, just to kind of control the load a little bit, because we all have that histamine bucket, and right now it's the hormone piece is really tipping it over. But can we lower that bucket with things like, mast cell supporting supplements, lower histamine diet, nervous system support to bring the stress load down, things like that. Okay, Rose is asking, what do you recommend for extremely low secretory IgA on a stool test? History of antibiotics, mold, sensitive to foods, candida, H. pylori, strep, staph. So obviously high inflammation, high viral loads and imbalances.
So yeah, SIGA is important, right? Not having some and not too much. So that's your mucosal layer that's protecting your gut and your gut lining. So if you don't have any of that mucosal layer, you're losing a whole layer of your protection, right? And so you're going to be less tolerant. You're going to have less immune protection, right, from chronic infections, all of that. So yeah, I'm wondering why this, my question would be like, okay, why is the SIGA so low? And kind of taking a look at that.
I'm skeptical a lot of times of the secretory IgA results on some of these tests. I've seen one lab will say it's low, another lab did a test within a few months, it's high, sometimes normal. So I think you have to be very careful how much you believe the results of any one given stool test. I just don't think the technology is good enough to take everything at face value. Now, just from the looks of what you're reporting, it almost looks like this would have been a GI map. And amongst other tests, the high staph and strep, those are normal to be in the gut. Now they're reporting it as a high level. Maybe it is in that stool. If it is, it's oftentimes a sign that your digestive function is off a little bit. Do you have enough digestive enzymes? Do you have enough stomach acid? Especially if the bacillus strains are elevated as well. So you can kind of look at that. And there are preparations that provide IgG, which will help the secretory IgA. We used to use colostrum a lot for something like that to boost the immune system, but so many people are sensitive to dairy that we've moved to some of these beef-based, blood beef-based formulas that will give you additional immunoglobulins that can make a difference. And so I think there's definitely a place for that, but you probably need more than just that given the stool results.
Okay, I think we have time for like two more. Okay, so even after moving, still having problems with MCAS and mold, does DAO help and Zeolite? So those are two tools in the toolbox, but knowing if they would be right for you individually, we can't say that today. Lynn, it would require more of us to know more about your case, which would be great for a strategy session or us to review in the advanced track. Let's see. Yeah, so DAO, for those who don't know, is the enzyme that breaks histamine down in the body, and zeolite is a binder, but it's a binder that binds to specific mycotoxins. So if the mycotoxins you have don't bind to zeolite, it may not be the right tool. Anything to add there, guys?
I would add, I don't like zeolite alone because zeolite can move heavy metals. And if you don't have another negative binder on, like a charcoal or clay or something like that, I just worry about heavy metals moving to places you don't want. That's what I would caution about.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I would say that it's more common than not that after you move out of mold, you're still going to have problems because those mold toxins are going to stay in your body. They can be from early childhood. And they've been building to a certain point where they cross a threshold and then you become symptomatic. But there could be a long history before that. Now, once you leave, those cells hold on to those mycotoxins very tightly. And so you need a program to get them out. And that's going to involve a lot of calming of mast cells of the nervous system and things like that. I find that the DOA is really helpful. And generally, you want to find out what mycotoxins you have because different binders have affinities for different toxins, like Kim said. And the zeolite can get some, but not all of them.
All right. We have time for one more. Kim or Cam, is there one that you saw that you wanted to answer?
Pam's question.
Which one?
Pam's question.
The top one? Okay, here we go.
Yeah, so go ahead, Jamie.
I'll just read it for everyone. Going from normal stools to stools consisting of pellets, so more like a 1 on the Bristol stool chart, when she started the low histamine diet. Is that normal? And I think this is a great question for this community because we often, like, part of stabilization is resolving those motility issues.
So my guess on something like this would be that going on a low histamine diet actually reduced some inflammation. So if you've got excess histamine in your gut, people tend towards loose stools with a lot of histamine in your gut and a lot of inflammation. And so removing some of that inflammation has allowed your gut to calm down, but then it's created some issues with motility. And it could be a motility issue, or it could just be an issue with, not, again, breaking down and using and moving stool through like you normally would. So you might need some things like osmotics that pull water into your intestines. We typically use magnesium oxide. Some people tolerate it, some people don't. There's other things that you can use if you don't. And then working on that digestion piece from the top down again, making sure you have enough stomach acid, making sure that you have enzymes on board, all of that helps. Incredibly supportive. But yeah, make sure you're having daily bowel movements. It's one of our pillars over here.
Yeah.
I would wonder too, what foods you took out of your diet and how much fiber did you remove from your diet? The pellets oftentimes are a function of like what Cam was talking about with osmotics. In other words, if you lose the ability to have water in your stool, it's going to get pellet-like and dry. And with the mast cells as well, you can negatively impact your motility. In other words, the muscle action of moving the stool through your intestines. So both of those things have to be addressed at different times.
Yeah. All right, just a quick reminder, if you're interested in getting more individualized support, you can find out how to work with us at mastcell360.com/application. And also, if you are on our newsletter and you read the email as a reminder to come to today's show, you might have heard that there was a special announcement. So if you haven't been on our website yet, you go check it out. We did a revamp, and it looks beautiful and it's more up to date. And we're looking to always, continue to add to those resources as well. And stay tuned for more additional really exciting updates from Mast Cell 360. All right, I want to let everyone know. I just want to say thank you for everyone showing up today. And if you're on the replay, thank you for taking that time out of your day. If you have a question watching the replay, feel free to, keep commenting. We do monitor and try to answer as many of those questions as we can, but we appreciate you guys tuning in with us live today. Alex, Kimberly, and Cam, do you have any parting words of advice for our audience? Don't all jump at once.
I think, one of the things that these forums, I think are really helpful for is, number one, stressing the basics, diet, sleep, exercise, and then treat the specific things you have, but make sure that the underlying health is strong. The other thing is that there are so many different things that can happen to the system. You can have so many dysfunctional aspects that it can be very self-defeating. Don't give up, because there are answers to these things and people get better. And it's just important to find someone that you can work with, that you trust, and find that you get good results with.
I guess I would add, just keep going, low and slow. If that's, not tolerating a lot, keep going. And get the help you need if you do need help to move forward. If you're really getting backed into a corner, that's kind of what made the big change for me, is just opening my eyes to certain things and seeing what I could do to move myself forward.
Yeah. And wherever that curiosity, like if there's a spark of curiosity today, maybe follow that. If it gives you one piece of advice, to kind of go, if you've been feeling stuck, it's like, what are you most curious about right now? Because like Kimberly said, low and slow, just taking one step in front of the other.
Yeah. And things can feel like rabbit trails, like all of these little things that go sideways can feel like rabbit trails. I would encourage people to kind of pull back and really think about yourself as an entire system, rather than this one thing going wrong, or this one thing going wrong, this one thing going wrong. What can you do that supports all of that getting better? And start there, and start with just one small thing, and then pick your next small thing. And it's okay to stop and just take a break and just relax every now and then too. You don't have to be on it 24/7.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for your time. We'll see you next week.